If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast. Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. Really appreciate you joining us. On last week's show, we had Phoenix come on and talk about several of the Dogman encounters he's had, most notably an encounter he had when he was 11, when he was home alone, unfortunately, one night. And between 4 and 5 a.m., unfortunately, a dogman came paying him a visit. He and his family, they call them Booger Bears, but to a little boy like that, it's just a monster. You can't tell him it's anything else. Well, we ran out of time on that show last week, so I wasn't able to ask him questions, and he still had experiences that he wasn't able to share. We ran out of time. Luckily, he's agreed to come back for a part 2 here tonight and share those other experiences with you and give me a chance to ask him a bunch of questions. And of course, if you're in the live chat and have questions for him, he's ready to answer your questions as well. Well, without any further ado, let's bring him in here now. Phoenix, thanks so much for coming back.
Hi, Vic. It's good to be back.
Well, it's great having you. It really is. Phoenix, I guess right off the top, if you can just share the other experiences that you've had with Dogmen, and then after you do that, that's when I'm going to dive into my questions for you.
Okay. So like I said, I think the last thing we mentioned was the furnace outside in the back, and that was in 2015, and things were relatively quiet, if memory serves correct, until about 2022. I was in a party chat on PlayStation with one of my friends and a cousin, and I was heating up my leftover Outback Steakhouse. It was the onion bloom thing, and it was in the air fryer, and I was just waiting for it to heat up. And I have a tendency to pace when I'm just in a party chat like that, but not actually on a game. And so I was pacing in the dining room between the table and the window in the back, which is facing the woods. And all of a sudden, as I'm, pacing and standing around waiting for my dinner, I heard what sounded like a roar, but the thing is it felt like it was so loud that it kind of vibrated through my chest. And I thought maybe I had somehow gotten disconnected and it was something from the game. But that's when both my friend and cousin were asking what that was. And so sitting there, like, oh, you heard that? So that wasn't from the game. No, they said. And I didn't actually see anything. I looked out the window, and these were lace curtains. So I mean, it's not like I could have just remained hidden. But I didn't see anything at that point. And I didn't have anything else strange happen that night, although I was a little shaken on that because I had no idea what that was. I think the next thing that happened may have been the time where I was sitting out on the front porch, and I was on a mobile game, and I feel like I talked about this in the last episode, but I was just sitting there and something walked, and hearing the footsteps, it sounded like it was walking with two legs as opposed to four. And they were very long strides. And as I'm sitting there, I'm kind of listening, and I hear it walk past the porch that I was on. Um, it goes down, crosses the road. I hear the crunch of the gravel, and the dumpster lid opens and then closes, and then it walks back up. And as I'm sitting there and listening, because now it has my attention, because there shouldn't be anyone there. And when it gets parallel to me, it starts doing the heavy breathing, very, very reminiscent of what I heard when I was 11. And as far as that goes, I saw the silhouette of it because there was a light source behind it, but as far as that part of the yard, it was completely dark, and I only saw the eyes. They were glowing like a bluish green with like an amber tint to it. And the thing about that porch is it comes up about 6 feet off the ground, and I am about 5'8", and whatever that was almost eye level with me from that high. And I collected my things and from my little table and went inside. That's when I got in touch with my ex, who was away with a friend at a birthday party. And I told him that, what had happened just then. And we decided I should call the police. We had a sheriff's deputy come out. And after he came out, it took him like maybe half an hour to get there. And the whole time I just felt really uncomfortable because of that. But when he got there, he walked around the property, walked around the campground and the store, which was the business that my ex's family has. And he wasn't really looking for like any prints or anything, but as I was following him with his flashlight, I didn't see any prints, but once he got around to the side of the house where it had walked, I declined to go any further towards the woods, because this thing, like I said, was apparently very large, and from the silhouette, it looked like it had those big pointy ears that had they not been so elongated and pointed like that, I would have maybe considered that was a bear, but I don't think I could rightly consider it to be a bear because of those ears and the way the eyes just seem to glow like that without any light source actually hitting them that I could tell. But after he left, it just felt very tense. It's a difficult sensation to describe. I would almost describe it like a kind of a pressure, like an external pressure on the outside of the body. But that's all I could describe it with, of how I felt after that sheriff deputy left. And the that night, I loaded up the shotgun, went upstairs to the office, and slept in the office computer chair next to that shotgun. And probably it wasn't the next day, but it wasn't more than a week, I think. I was coming home from work, and as I pulled up, I could see the back door was just about ripped off the hinges. It was just hanging by the lower hinge. And we did call the conservation department out. And when the conservation officer came out, he assessed the damage on the door, and we asked him, what do we do about this bear that tried to get into the house? And he said, well, there are some very large claw marks on the door, but they're not consistent with a bear. And at that point, we're like, okay, maybe it's Mittens. Now, Mittens is the mountain lion that frequented our area. And that's just the name that I gave it. But when I brought this up, he was like, this is definitely not a big cat. So at this point, my ex-husband and I looked at each other in kind of both shock and amusement, because like, what do you mean? This isn't a cat, but it's not consistent with a bear. And so then my ex asked, do you think it's a person? He said, absolutely not. So we were questioning what else could it be. And the only thing he said after that was, we don't know what it could be, so we're just going to have to go with bear. He left some rubber shotgun shells if we needed them. Not that I needed them. I had magnum shot slugs for the shotgun. So and after that, for about maybe a week or two, every night from maybe 1 in the morning to 3 in the morning, there was a helicopter that would fly around our area. And at first, I thought maybe it was just like the medevac chopper from the hospital, because they occasionally would fly over. And I just happened to be up late enough one night that I was out on the porch and it flew by, but I could see that it was using a searchlight. And I thought that was really strange. And so every time I would hear it after that, just out of curiosity, I would get up and go and look. And every time for that whole about 2 weeks, it was a helicopter flying around with a searchlight around the woods. And it was flying fairly low. But it's like they were looking for something. And I had no idea who that would be, because that wouldn't make sense. I didn't think for like conservation department to send someone out looking for something for like a bear, especially in that area. And I don't think there was like any escaped convicts or anything, but I just thought that was extremely odd. And as far as the other incidents go, there was a storm, um, and so the storm blew over a half of a tree. It's kind of growing up in. It was not growing up in, but the deck was built around the tree, so it was basically part of their deck, which was the neighbor's house. Now our driveway, the way it worked, was it was on the other side of the cabin where they lived, and it would just lead up to the back of our house to the back door under the carport. Well, this tree had been partially blown over, but there was one big long branch that was the only thing that was blocking the car from getting out. When I noticed that it was blocking my way out, since I did have to work in the morning, I was like, well, we need to get this taken care of so I can get to work in the morning. And my ex came out there with me and looked at it, and he was like, all right, well, just give me about an hour to finish this movie, because he was streaming on Discord with a few friends watching the movie together. And so I go back in, continue doing whatever I was doing. And once he was done with his movie, we came back out. He went and got the chainsaw. We met up at the tree, and that big branch was gone. And I looked at where the branch had been on the tree, and it looked like it had been broken and twisted off. And I wasn't really sure what to make of that. And my ex tried to rationalize that it must have been one of the neighbors who came out and got rid of it. And I was like, well, they didn't use a chainsaw. We would have heard that. And I said that, we both tried to break it with our combined strength, and it was too strong to break. It's too big. And so I was like, it couldn't have been a neighbor, because they wouldn't have been able to break it either. And they used no tools, and the way it's broken indicates that it was just brute forced off of the main trunk. And he he would not hear any other explanation. But I tried to reason with him that, even if someone were to have passed by, it would have been also at that point too dark for them to even notice it. And that if they did, we would have heard them. We heard nothing. And he was just adamant that someone that lived nearby had come and removed that branch. And as far as anything else, I don't really have anything of note, except for one evening after I'd gotten off of work. I usually got off at about 4, unless I stayed late, which would have been about 6. Because the drive-through at the bank that I worked at the time was open until 6. So either I was coming home late from work, or I had gone grocery shopping, and either way, it was dusk. It was starting to lose light. But the only other thing that I can say that I may have seen is on my way home on the road out in the country. I did see something as I was coming down a hill. And at first I did think bear, but the way it stood so tall and moved down the embankment so fast and seemingly on 2 feet, where it disappeared into the really tall underbrush before going into the woods. It kind of did resemble that, but as far as what I've experienced, that would pretty much cover that.
Wow, a lot of experiences, especially considering how many encounters you've had, Phoenix. How long did you know about me before you decided to contact me?
Um, After the incident in 22, where uh, I heard the breathing while I was on the porch and saw the silhouette, I started researching into what that could have possibly been because I had no logical explanations. And given the experience I had when I was 11, I wanted answers. And I could think of nothing logically. So I started to expand my search and eventually came across your show, as well as other resources pointing to the Dogman. And I'll say initially I wrote it off, but I did continue to listen to your show uh, just because I like to hear these experiences. But um, so I would say since about 2022 is when I first started
Wow,
listening to your show.
about 3 years then. Well, if you'd had all these experiences, how could you write it off?
Well, because since I hadn't seen like up close and where they're close enough where I couldn't deny what it was. Um, I think that would be why, because yes, I saw what the silhouette looked like. I saw what the shadow looked like, but I didn't actually see up close without any possible other explanation. I mean, not that there's really much explanation for the things that I saw, which is what led me on that search. But um, I think that is the big reason why, especially for so long, that I wrote it off as well. Typical response would be, "Oh, that's a bear." No, I don't think so. And having reflected on them for a bit, was when I decided to finally contact you, because I was kind of hoping we could, I don't know, at least me share the story, maybe gain some info out of it, some insight.
Wow. Yeah, that was a compensation device trying to write it off. Even though you'd seen the silhouette that one night and you saw the shadow on your sister's window, I can understand why you would do that because the world's a lot more comfortable of a place. It's a safer place if you can somehow convince yourself, yeah, these things aren't really out there. It was just my eyes playing tricks on me. But I think deep down you knew exactly what you were dealing with. And again, I understand it, but I think that's why you did that. You think I'm on the right track here, or do you think
I
I'm wrong?
think so, actually.
Yeah, that would make sense. It really would. And Phoenix, being a kid is hard enough. Did you suffer from any behavioral issues or other problems after you had that really frightening experience in the middle of the night?
Mm, No, I wouldn't say I would. I was a relatively good kid, but um, aside from just not going on those hikes with my dogs for a few months, no, I don't think I really had anything except for, like I mentioned before, I really do not care to go camping, especially anywhere that is more remote.
Well, that's totally understandable. It's one thing after having one encounter to try to bring yourself to do something like that, but you have a history of encounters with these things. I can only imagine how difficult it's been to come to terms with all that. I mean, it's just every time you turned around, it was reinforced that these things are out there. Wow, that's not good. The radio interference.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I think someone in the area is using a non-FCC compliant radio that's way too powerful and it's bleeding over into my equipment. So I apologize for any of that feedback that we get or the buzz, but we'll soldier on and try to keep on going. But
Alrighty.
it's one thing to hear your parents tell you that booger bears are actually out there, but seeing them, that's totally different. After you realize one was definitely out there, i.e., the night when you were 11 and that one tormented you, did you ever go outside alone again after that point, or did you?
Uh, I did, but it was definitely a good little while before, say for example, I would take the trash out after dark. And then when if I were to, walk anywhere, say to my aunt's house or anything like that, I made sure to always have one of the dogs with me.
Yeah, well, whatever you can do to make yourself feel comfortable, by all means, I'm glad you did that. Yeah, whatever it takes. Like I said, being a kid, it's hard enough. You have all these fears, some are justified, some aren't. But when you have this thrown into the mix, that's just not right. No kid should have to deal with that. They really shouldn't. It's also hard enough to wrap your mind around the idea of how you could possibly have one dogman encounter, but in your case, you've had a ton of them. Do you think there's something behind that? The fact you've had so many? Or do you think it's just dumb luck?
I I question that actually. Um, I've noted, as listening to your show, it does seem to target specific people. Um, I don't know if they seem to just like to go after more spiritual people or not, but um, I do seem to notice a trend, um, that they do typically go after Christians, but or at least that's what I've gathered so far. And now, mind you, I haven't gotten completely caught up with all of your episodes yet, but um, that is just the trend I've noticed. No, I am not Christian, but I am more on the spiritual side. But
It
that is
seems
just one thing that I've noted.
it seems like there is some sort of a religious element to these guys, at least some of them. Well, actually quite a few encounters when we get down to it, but there have been plenty of atheists who've seen these things too, so I'm not really sure what to make of that. There's so many things to this whole dogman phenomenon that it's just really hard to know what to think about it, but that's just how it is. Do you think that the same Dogman has been present and involved every time you've had all these encounters, or do you think we're talking about different ones?
I would have to say that I think it would be different ones. Um, just for this whole reason of, the one when I was 11 that was in Mississippi, and the other one um, would have been in Missouri.
Well, I can appreciate you feeling that way because of that fact, but I mean, there are people who have been on vacation thousands of miles away from their homes. They have a dogman encounter, it shakes them up, so they decide to fly home the next day. And that next morning, that next afternoon, they go out back behind their house and have an encounter with the exact same dogman. So, yeah, you never really know. It's entirely possible. And that's just another thing that's so hard to wrap your mind around. I mean, there's so many credible eyewitnesses who report things that point soundly towards these things being either demonic entities or some type of evil entities. But then again, there are other credible eyewitnesses, quite a few of them, who report seeing these things do that point soundly towards them being nothing more special than flesh and blood creatures that just try to make a living out there in the woods. So
Mm.
maybe it's a case where some dogmen are flesh and blood, just normal creatures, and others are supernatural beings from the ether. Maybe some are made in a test tube, but yeah, it's really hard to know. It's hard to know what to think about that.
Oh, well, I have my own theory on that, actually. Um, if you're aware of the Fae, I have a theory that kind of ties in with the missing 411 cases, but um, uh, what's it called? Tirnanog, also known as the Otherworld, or commonly referred to as the Fey Wilds. There is a bit of lore regarding that area, um, where it is said if a human ends up in that area, they can, if they cannot control their emotions, can be turned into beasts. And with so many people disappearing and no traces and under strange circumstances, um, I mean, yeah, it kind of does sound like that could be, some people falling into, say, a portal or something. Um, Maybe they're not all former formerly human, but um, I think that's a possibility.
Yeah, it's really hard to know what to think. And there's so many things about this we're never going to know. So all we can do is guess when it comes to things like that. But yeah, like I said, there are tons and tons of very credible eyewitnesses who report seeing them step out of portals, and they witness other things that point soundly towards them having abilities that are well above and beyond what just a normal animal would be able to do or have. So yeah, it's something else. Have you ever played with a Ouija board, Phoenix?
Mm, I'd probably say yes, I think, or at least was there when it was played with.
So you never had your hands on the board or
No,
held hands with the people using it.
no.
Okay, that's good. Hate the idea that you're actually there and might have taken something home with you, but wow. Yeah, there's definitely seems to be a connection between Ouija boards and a lot of eyewitnesses, because a lot of eyewitnesses have played with them. So it does make you wonder. Do you think the reason why that helicopter flew over your property acting strangely the way it did was due to you contacting that conservation officer and having them come out? Or do you think it's due to some other reason?
Well, being that, like I said, I don't recall any uh, escaped convicts being in the area, and this being almost immediately after that gentleman came out to assess things for us. I would have to say that they were looking for something.
Oh,
Who that would be, I wouldn't know, but someone was looking for something, most assuredly.
I'd say they were. Yeah, that's a given their behavior. So, yeah, they probably are connected. Were you raised to believe that cryptids didn't exist, or were your parents open-minded about them being around? And it's a two-part question. Did they ever talk about things like that with you?
You know, not really, no. Um, it's not something that we really believed in. I think we entertained the idea at times, but when all was said and done, they were simply like, well, if these things existed, then more people would have, for example, pictures or video. And I mean, phone camera's not going to do that good. Not all of us run around with $3,000 cameras. So,
Yeah, no doubt.
as so yeah, no, I, and the thing is, my mom even has a couple of friends who have said that they have seen several dogmen. They went on uh, some sort of camping trip, I think, is the story that I remember, and they were across the. It was pretty wide creek from what I heard described, but they said that a couple of them stood on their hind legs and looked at them, and they felt like they were menacing. And I don't remember these friends' names, but I wish I could get a hold of them.
Well, you'll have that sometimes. Yes.
But yeah, she doesn't necessarily believe in those things because we would have confirmed that they exist by now.
Well, there are a lot of things that are out there that we don't know about that aren't officially considered to be extant. So that's a pretty flawed way of thinking.
That's true, and I've tried to tell her that, but um, she wouldn't budge.
Yeah, well, some people have opinions that definitely aren't based in fact. I say she's definitely one of them. For me, there's something about your second encounter that's got this extra creep factor to it. One of the biggest factors in children feeling secure is their belief that their parents can protect them from just about anything. Did that experience blow any sense of security that you had out of the water, or was your sense of security unaffected?
My sense of security was definitely affected, I would say, because, um, like I said, I was always at home alone in the morning because they had to get up and go to work and drop off my siblings. So I was totally alone. And so, actually, for quite a while afterward, um, uh, when I would wake up in the morning, I just had this intense anxiety because of that experience. And I knew that there was no one there to help me because they were gone, they were at work or on their way to work. And, back then cell phones weren't uh, widely in use. They had one, but a lot of the areas that they drove through to get to work, because my stepdad was a farmer, and Mom worked in a couple of towns away, and it was a lot of country back roady areas that she would go to, just because it was quicker from our location. But there wasn't really any way for me to reach them typically because they were out in the middle of nowhere. And so really the only person I had in close proximity was my great grandfather and the other neighbor who lived nearby.
Wow, poor little guy. That's horrible. I'm glad your grandpa was right there next door, but still, I mean, if you have something that's going down, being able to contact your parents immediately, there's a lot
Mhm.
of value to that. And the fact that you couldn't do that, that's horrible. But then again,
Yeah.
I'm sure they had to do what they had to do. I'm not faulting them for that because after all, in their eyes, your grandfather was right there, but still, that didn't make this any easier for you, not by a long shot. Being an adult now, Phoenix, after having had such a traumatic encounter, talking about the one when you were 11 home alone that night, what advice would you like to share with any little kids who've had their own encounters with dogmen who might be listening to tonight's show?
Well, um, I would say if anything like that were to happen to another kid, try and get in contact with someone who can be there relatively quickly. Um, I wasn't able to because I was afraid to go to the phone, which was right next to a window, and I was terrified that if I went to that phone, that whatever that was going to reach through that window and snatch me up and drag me out of the house. But I would say try and find, especially most kids these days have a cell phone or just a means to contact someone nearby. But um, I would say try to not engage or provoke it, and try and get someone to come help you at that house.
Yeah, that's good advice. Really good advice. It's always extra painful when you hear about little kids having encounters with these things because it's bad enough when you're an adult. A well adjusted adult is going to likely have trouble coming to terms with an experience like this. A little kid, they don't stand a chance. But of course, they can try to get help and everything to deal with it, but it just makes it that much more difficult. It really does.
Mhm.
Excuse me. Have you shared your encounters with every important person in your life, or do you do that based on evaluating how their response is going to be, in your opinion?
Well, I did tell my father about the incident in Missouri where I was on the front porch, and he he wanted to say it was my ex and some friends, but they were all the way in St. Louis at that point. Um, and I had watched a couple of videos on their feed um, of the party, so I knew they were hours away. But he didn't seem to believe it could have been anything but a person trying to mess with me, which would be stupid. Everyone knew we were armed. Um, everyone in that area was armed, so it would be stupid to mess with people like that. Um, but he didn't seem to believe it could be anything other than a person, and that kind of irritated me actually. But the only other person I've actually told, I mean, my cousin, of course, because he was there when I mean, in the party chat when he heard the roar over the microphone, and then also that same friend is aware of both encounters as well.
It really is a shame that you have to evaluate whether it's a good idea to share an experience like that, a very traumatic experience like that, or in your case, traumatic experiences, plural, with other people, because you're not sure how they're going to respond to it. When putting it out there, especially with people that you love and who are close to you, that's the best thing that you could do, as long as they're going to support you and not make fun of you, of course. That's why I talk about the whole prison without walls effect, because that's really how it is. It's like living inside one. I'm not sure if you thought about this or not, Phoenix, but if you have, when you hear people or see people make comments about how they've never had an encounter with a dog man, but they want to have one, what goes through your mind?
I have mixed thoughts on this because I am the same way. Uh, like I mentioned, I've never actually seen one full on. I would like to be able to see one and not be able to deny in my mind what it is, even though with its features that I have seen, it most certainly was not a bear. But at the same time, it's like, no, you really don't want to see one because that the first thing that always pops up is those two encounters, and primarily the one when I was 11, because that one was where it literally tormented me. And so I kind of view that as like a double-edged sword. Like, yes, that would be interesting, but no, you don't want that.
You're right. Yeah, you don't want to have a dogman encounter. There's life before and after a dogman encounter. You know that. You've lived it, but there's so many people out there who want to have encounters with these guys who've never seen one that just don't realize that. That's unfortunate. If you have any questions you want me to ask Phoenix, please go ahead and type them out in all caps if you're in the live chat now. And then I'll just go through those questions and I'll ask them some of them. And also, before I get back to the questions, tonight I dropped 4 new episodes of my new Dogman podcast. The new podcast is called Dogman Tales. You can't find it on YouTube. You would need to use your favorite way of listening to podcasts to listen. iHeartRadio, Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, Spreaker, you name the podcast platform and the show's available. Again, it's called Dogman Tales, and Tales is spelled T as in Tom, A-L-E-S. All right, moving forward, you've never seen a dogman clearly. You've only seen the silhouette of one that was standing in the dark that one night, and then you saw the shadow of the one that was on your sister's window. Deep down, do you wish you could have gotten a clear view of one, or are you glad that you weren't able to do that?
I would say probably not the one when I was 11, because I was already terrified. If I had seen, and even seeing the shadow, I was already a pretty big horror movie buff at that point anyway. I knew what werewolves were. They were my favorite genre, favorite mythical beast. And, they still are. But I don't think I could have handled that at that age.
Yeah.
When I was an adult and I had that encounter, yeah, I felt incredible anxiety and that primal fear, like I felt back then. But I also felt a little more secure because I had a shotgun. I had the 3-inch Magnum slug rounds. I felt more secure. I felt if it couldn't be killed, it could at least be repelled. So I think I would have handled it better as an adult, yes, but as a child, no, I would not have.
Yeah, well, you have so many more experiences to draw upon, to fall back on as an adult. So, yeah, that's a given there. That's one of the reasons why it's so unfortunate that kids have encounters with these guys too. I really hate that. I do. When you had that traumatic encounter when you were 11, Shadow and Sasha were chained up outside, you said. Now, you were just a kid at the time, granted, but would you have gotten into trouble if you would have brought those two in the house before you headed over to your grandfather's house?
I probably would have. Um, yeah, I would say I probably would have.
Wow. That really is a shame. Can you imagine the terror they experienced that night, having that thing roaming around the house, being chained up to a dog box? That's just horrible. It really is. But like I said, you were a kid. I mean, you could only do so much.
That's true. I did want to bring them in, but I knew um, Sasha was she was partially house trained, but Shadow was not. Um, he would have messed everywhere, and that's where I would have gotten in trouble. Um, but yeah, I did definitely want to bring them in, and I did get a bit more protective if there were, you know, strange sounds out at night. Um, and I would go out because I felt a little more bold when when everyone else was there and I wasn't alone. So I would go out and check on them if there was any kind of noises outside.
I'm sure you did feel more bold. Yeah, that's natural there. Well, let's get to some of these questions here. The first one on deck is from, that's a mouthful. The EU has a trade embargo on Britain. That's an interesting name for a YouTube account. Anyway, they want to know, are there any caves nearby where this dogman could be living?
In Mississippi, no, not that I was aware of. I've been all over that property for years, and on my little hiking trips with my dogs, I never came across any sort of cave. But in Missouri, yes, and there was one. Actually, I think there were a couple that were not terribly far away from the house, and one of them, because we lived on a lake. One of these caves in particular, because my ex had been in that one, basically goes uh, under the lake and goes across uh, that section of water and comes up somewhere on the other side. And I'd never been in them, but there are a couple out there.
Well, they love caves, so they're probably using them at least sometime, at some point. The next question is from Bang Bang. She wanted to know, Phoenix, did it smile at you? But you said the one time you had the sighting, all you saw was a silhouette. So I take it the answer was no.
Yeah, if it did, I couldn't have seen it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, the next question is from I Like Ike, and they want to know, after you had your experience, did you have odd or weird events after that?
Mm, aside from the like I tried to describe, like the external pressure around the body, um, and I eventually took it to mean that that was like a sign that they were nearby. Other than that, not necessarily.
Interesting. The last one for you is from Beverly Yeager, and she wants to know, Phoenix, what were you thinking when you felt the rumble going through your chest?
um, at first, I really did think that I had like unplugged the headset from my controller, and maybe that there had been a sound come from the TV, because we had a theater system, so it could do that. But when I realized, after both my friend and my cousin were like, "What was that?" I realized that was something outside, which was probably right behind me at the window. And once I realized that, I immediately moved away from that window. um, but yeah, I did legitimately think that it was something from the TV at first.
Well, it's understandable. Occam's razor, the simplest explanation. But unfortunately, that's not what it was. I sure wish that's all it was, but yeah, unfortunately, that wasn't the case. I've got one more question that popped up from Ann Consul, and Ann wants to know, were there any odors?
No, not that I can remember. With the first one, I didn't even come out of the house until I heard that sounded like a gunshot, and then everything went quiet, and it appeared to be gone. And it was at least 10 minutes before I even went outside at that point. And for the one in Missouri, where I was outside with it, I didn't smell anything. Nothing like what I've heard described anyway. I did kind of get a hint of wet dog, but nothing like the rotting meat that I frequently hear other people talk about.
Yeah, sometimes eyewitnesses report smelling that, and other times they don't. Most of the time they don't. But yeah, sometimes they do. Well, before we get out of here, Phoenix, do you have any closing comments you'd like to put out there for us?
Um, I would say that if you've had any kind of experience, try not to do what I did and just deny it. um, because yeah, while I didn't technically see it full on up close, um, I know that it was not something that I could logically explain away, even though I tried to for years. And I think eventually that will start to take a toll on you. So it's good to find someone that you can talk to about that.
Yeah, it would be so nice if you could just explain away a dogman encounter, or as
Mhm.
in your case, dogman encounters, plural. But I mean, you can't fool yourself. You had those experiences, something real was going on. And then you had irrefutable proof when you saw the shadow on your sister's window, and then you actually saw that one. You saw the silhouette, but you saw a dogman nonetheless. So, like I said, you can't fool yourself. You can do things to try to make yourself feel better, but deep down, the truth is always going to be there. So, it's best just to try to deal with it head on. But having said that, I can't thank you enough for coming back on and sharing those new experiences with us that you shared tonight with us, and answering all these questions. I really appreciate it.
Well, it was a pleasure coming on and sharing that with you all.
Well, it's great having you. Like I said, thanks again so much for your time, Phoenix, and have a great night.
Thank you. You do the same.
Thanks. I'll try. We'll see ya. Well, that's it for another episode. Like I said earlier, I've got a new Dogman podcast I released called Dogman Tales. If you're having a hard time finding a way to listen to it, if you don't have a go-to podcast app or podcast platform, if you go to dogmenencounters.com and visit the podcast page, there's a link there for Dogman Tales that you can click on, and it'll take you right to the Spreaker homepage for the show. That way, it makes it really easy to listen to it that way as a fallback. But having said that, if you've had a dogman encounter that you'd like to get help with so that I can help you come to terms with it, or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, please go to dogmenencounters.com and submit a report. If you do that, then I'll be more than happy to contact you and schedule a phone conversation so we can get to the bottom of what's going on with your experience or experiences. But having said that, thanks again so much for listening, everyone. I really appreciate it.